Welcome back, horror fans, cinephiles, and giallo enthusiasts. This is Tanner Leeser, your host for all things giallo here on The King in Giallo. Our next stop on our journey through giallo cinema is the second giallo film from Aldo Lado, Who Saw Her Die, released on May 12th, 1972. Well, let's waste no time and get right into it. Here is Who Saw Her Die overview. Who Saw Her Die, or Chi l'ha vista morire, is an Italian and West German co-production directed by Aldo Lado, who also co-wrote the film along with Francesco Barilli and Massimo D'Avak. Music is composed by the maestro Ennio Morricone. The cast is comprised of George Lazenby as Franco Serpieri, Anita Strindberg as Elizabeth Serpieri, Adolfo Celi as Serafian, Nicoletta Elmi as Roberta Serpieri, Dominique Boschero as Ginevra Storelli, Peter Chatel as Philip Vernon, Piero Vida as journalist Kuman, Jose Quaglio as Bonaluti, and Alessandro Haber as Father James. The plot begins as Roberta travels to Venice to stay with her father, Franco. When she vanishes and is later discovered murdered, both Franco and his estranged wife, Elizabeth, are shattered. As it becomes clear that the authorities are making little progress, the grieving parents take matters into their own hands. Franco's search pulls him deeper into a sordid underworld of lust and corruption until it brings him face to face with the killer. Who Saw Her Die is one of the more haunting entries in the giallo genre, visually rich, thematically bold, and emotionally somber. Cited as one of the stronger entries in the giallo canon, though its impact is somewhat diminished by structural issues. It is one of those giallo films that comes this close to greatness. It opens with such an emotional and atmospheric punch that you start to think, hey, this might be one of the best of its kind. But then, somewhere in the middle, it stalls, losing momentum to repetitive scenes and narrative wheel spinning. It finds its footing again by the end, but by then the damage is done. It's still a really good film, maybe even a top-tier giallo in certain circles, but it ultimately lands in that frustrating, could-have-been-a masterpiece category. The story taps into the same uncomfortable subject matter as Fulci's Don't Torture a Duckling, 1972. We're dealing with the murder of a child. But whereas Fulci leans into provocation, Aldo Lado takes a different path. There's a quiet dignity to how he handles the material. The horror here isn't in the blood or brutality, it's in the grief, in the numbness, in the helplessness of two parents trying to move forward after losing their daughter. Lado isn't aiming for shock, he's aiming for sorrow. Lado grew up in Venice, and he used the city not as a tourist's backdrop, but as a place haunted by its own history. In an interview on the Anchor Bay DVD release, he said that Venice, quote, has the scent of death. And you can feel that in every frame. The film starts off warm and sunlit. Children play, life bustles, but as the story unfolds, the atmosphere curdles, shadows lengthen, fog rolls in. Venice becomes a maze, not of streets, but of silence, suspicion, and unresolved trauma. If you've seen Don't Look Now, which came out a year later in 1973, you'll feel a spiritual connection here. Both films turn Venice into a city of ghosts. The killer is a masterstroke. Dressed in black, face hidden, they slip through scenes like a shadow. They're rarely front and center. Instead, they linger at the edges of the frame, half visible, half forgotten. It's deeply unnerving. You find yourself scanning backgrounds, trying to catch a glimpse. That feeling, that evil could be hiding in plain sight while everyone else just walks by obliviously, that's the true horror of Who Saw Her Die. At the center of it all is Franco, played by George Lazenby, and his estranged wife Elizabeth, played by Anita Strindberg. He's an artist, carefree, a bit emotionally distant. She's more grounded. They're clearly not on the same wavelength emotionally, but when their daughter Roberta is murdered, grief forces them into a kind of reconciliation. There's a sex scene after the funeral that is awkward, clumsy, and heartbreakingly human. They're trying to find connection again, to prove to themselves they're still alive, but the sorrow is too heavy. It's one of the most honest and emotionally raw scenes in any giallo. That's not something you say lightly. Lazenby was fresh off his infamous one-and-done stint as James Bond in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, 1969. Born in 1939, he worked as a car salesman and a model before landing the Bond role. Despite being dubbed here, he gives a surprisingly grounded performance. Gone is the clean-shaven secret agent. Instead, we get a scruffier, more vulnerable man. Lazenby lost 35 pounds for the role of Franco. Lado reportedly praised him as a total professional. His character is a loving and doting father, but his ambition for his artistic career ultimately blindsides him to the well-being of his daughter, Roberta, and this leads to her murder. He would later spoof his Bond image in The Kentucky Fried Movie, 1977, and appeared in Peter Bogdanovich's underrated Saint Jack, 1979. He was also close friends with Bruce Lee and had been cast to co-star in Stoner, 1974, before Lee's death. He ended up taking the lead. Though his film career never exploded, Lazenby continued working in television and occasional films well into the 1980s and beyond. And for those keeping track of Bond alumni, Adolfo Celi, who played Emilio Largo in Thunderball 1965, also appears in a key supporting role, delivering gravitas in his scenes. He appeared in 2 other giallo films previously this same year alone, Who Killed the Prosecutor and Why, and Eye in the Labyrinth, and would appear in one more, Naked Girl Murdered in the Park. Anita Strindberg, who often got sidelined in other gialli such as A Lizard in a Woman's Skin in 1971, and later this same year in Tropic of Cancer, although occasionally playing a principal role such as in The Case of the Scorpion's Tail, 1971, and 1972's The Two Faces of Fear, here she has more range to work with and she uses it well. But the real standout is Nicoletta Elmi as Roberta. With her red hair and haunting eyes, Elmi became a staple of Italian genre cinema. She began acting in 1969 and went on to appear in Bay of Blood, 1971, Barren Blood, 1972, Flesh for Frankenstein, 1973, The Night Child, Dario Argento's Deep Red, and Footprints on the Moon, all 1975. She also played the ticket taker in Lamberto Bava's Demons, 1985, one of her last screen roles. She has since retired from acting. Now, let's talk structure. The first 30 minutes? Tight, suspenseful, beautifully shot. It builds and builds until Roberta's body is found floating in the canal, a moment that hits hard. But then the second act gets bogged down in too many vague leads, red herrings, and exposition that doesn't move the story forward. Thankfully, the film rebounds for a strong final act. However, the reveal of the killer's identity, according to Lado, was forced on him by the producers. It doesn't land with the weight it should have. You can tell the film wanted to go somewhere more emotionally or thematically daring, but got undercut at the last second. Ennio Morricone's score, as always, elevates everything. It's mournful and eerie, filled with childlike voices that feel more ghostly than innocent. It sets the tone immediately and keeps you emotionally off balance throughout. As for Aldo Lado, his career is all over the place, but when he hits hard. He had worked as an assistant on spaghetti westerns and then with Bernardo Bertolucci on The Conformist, 1970, before getting the chance to direct. He had already made Short Night of Glass Dolls, 1971, a cerebral thriller often credited as a giallo, I would say so myself, and would later direct the harrowing Night Train Murders, 1975, one of his most notorious films. He even dabbled in sci-fi with the Star Wars-inspired The Humanoid, 1979, and returned to giallo with Circle of Fear, 1992. Who Saw Her Die may not be a perfect film, but it's arguably his most personal, shot in the city of his childhood and soaked in his own memories of beauty tinged with decay. This isn't a giallo you watch for the kills. You watch it for the mood, for the grief, for the spaces in between. It's about what happens when the horror doesn't come from a masked killer in the night, but from the knowledge that someone walked past you in daylight and still got away with murder. Thank you for watching this overview video. As of the time of recording this, Who Saw Her Die can be found on YouTube, Tubi, Shudder, and Amazon Prime. Stay tuned for my unscripted movie review for Who Saw Her Die, as well as the Jolly Tally. Comment your predictions for the AZ score for the movie and the final Jolly Tally score. Thank you all very much for your continued support. This is Tanner Leeser for The King in Giallo, and if nothing else, I'll see you next time.
A real beauty, isn't she?
Like her father.
You mean like mother.